They said the white deer of Ashford Keep had never been touched by human hands. Not once in the 12 years since it first appeared on the estate grounds, moving through morning mist like something conjured from old legends. It fled from huntsmen, evaded nobles who tried to lure it with offerings, and vanished the moment crowds gathered. So when it walked calmly across the winter garden and lowered its head beneath the quiet hand of a maid no one had bothered to learn the name of, every person in the courtyard understood they were witnessing something impossible. And Duke Evander Ashford, standing frozen among his guests, felt the ground shift beneath the careful control he had spent a lifetime perfecting. 6 weeks earlier, the deer had been nothing more than a curiosity mentioned occasionally at dinner parties. Beautiful, untouchable, a fitting symbol for an estate known for its restraint and formality. Evander had seen it only twice himself, always at a distance, always disappearing before he could properly observe it. He thought little of it beyond ensuring the groundskeepers left it undisturbed. The maid arrived during that same period. Renna, hired through the usual channels, recommended by a retiring housekeeper who vouched quietly for her competence. She came with a single trunk, spoke only when addressed, and moved through Ashford Keep with the practiced invisibility expected of her station. She was perhaps 25, though no one had asked. Dark hair always pinned neatly back. Steady hands. Eyes that noticed everything but revealed nothing. She cleaned the library each morning before sunrise, laid fires with precision, and vanished into the servants' quarters each evening without drawing attention. Evander would not have noticed her at all. Except for the morning, he entered the library earlier than usual and found her standing completely still beside the window. She had not heard him approach. Her posture was relaxed in a way it never was when observed, her gaze fixed on something beyond the glass. Following her line of sight, he saw the white deer standing in the garden below, half hidden by winter roses. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said quietly. She startled so sharply, she nearly dropped the book she had been holding, spinning toward him with visible alarm, before composure slammed back into place. "Your Grace, forgive me, I didn't hear the deer," he continued, nodding toward the window. "You were watching it." "Yes, my lord." She set the book down with careful precision. "I should return to my duties." "Have you seen it before?" She hesitated, just long enough to suggest the truth was more complicated than a simple answer aloud. "A few times. Early mornings, mostly. It runs from everyone else." "Yes, my lord. But not from you." Another pause. "I don't approach it. I only watch." There was something in her tone, not defensiveness, but a quiet certainty that suggested she understood something about the creature others had missed. Evander found himself curious despite himself, though he dismissed her shortly after and thought little more of it. Until the morning, everything changed. It happened during a winter gathering meant to impress foreign dignitaries. The courtyard had been prepared with meticulous care, tables arranged beneath heated canopies, music drifting through cold air. Evander stood among his guests, maintaining the controlled courtesy that defined every public moment of his life. Then someone gasped. The white deer had emerged from the tree line, moving with that same ethereal grace that made it seem almost unreal. Conversation stopped. Guests turned, enchanted, as the creature stepped onto the stone pathway. "Magnificent," breathed the ambassador beside him. A few nobles moved instinctively closer, hands outstretched. The deer's head lifted sharply, muscles tensing. It would bolt any second. Everyone knew it would. Except it didn't. Its attention had fixed on something else entirely. Someone else. Renna stood near the garden wall, a tray balanced in her hands, her posture frozen in the same stillness Evander had witnessed that morning in the library. She wasn't looking at the guests. She was looking at the deer, and the deer was looking back. It moved toward her. Not quickly, not cautiously, but with clear intention. The entire courtyard held its breath as the creature crossed the distance between them, ignoring a duchess who tried softly calling to it, stepping past a nobleman who extended his hand. Renna set the tray down slowly, her movements so controlled they barely registered as movement at all. She did not reach for the deer, did not speak, simply stood there, entirely still, as it approached. The deer stopped directly in front of her. Then, in a gesture so deliberate it silenced even the whispered speculation, it lowered its head and pressed its brow gently against her open palm. The impact of that single moment rippled through the courtyard like a stone dropped into still water. Because this was not an animal being lured or tamed. This was recognition. Choice. Evander felt something shift inside his chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a sudden, disorienting awareness that he had been looking at his household, at his world, with eyes that missed far too much. Renna's hand moved carefully along the deer's neck, her touch so gentle it barely disturbed the white fur. And the creature, wild and untouchable, leaned into that touch as though it had been waiting 12 years for exactly this. The guests recovered first, as guests always did, with nervous laughter and speculation that tried to make the impossible ordinary. A trick of scent, perhaps, or the maid kept food in her pockets. Explanations multiplied quickly, each one more desperate than the last, because none of them wanted to acknowledge what they had actually witnessed, that something wild and free had chosen someone they would never have noticed. Evander said nothing. He watched Renna's hand move along the deer's neck with a gentleness that suggested not training, but understanding. Watched the way she seemed to communicate through stillness rather than sound. And when the deer finally stepped back and disappeared into the forest as silently as it had come, he watched the way she stood there alone, her expression unreadable, but her hands trembling slightly as she lifted the tray again. He found her an hour later in the stellary, scrubbing serving dishes with focused intensity. "Miss Collier." She turned immediately, setting down her work. "Your Grace. Walk with me." It was not a request. They moved through the corridors in silence until they reached the library, where he closed the door behind them and studied her properly for the first time. She stood with perfect posture, hands folded, eyes lowered just enough to observe protocol. Everything about her presentation suggested absolute ordinariness. Except she was not ordinary. The deer had proven that. "How long?" he asked. "My lord, how long have you been able to approach it?" She hesitated, weighing her answer carefully. "I've never approached it, Your Grace. It approaches me. That distinction matters to you." "Yes." Simple. Direct. "Why?" "Because I don't presume to control what chooses freely." The answer landed with unexpected weight. Evander had spent his entire life controlling things, his estate, his emotions, the careful distance he maintained from anything that might disturb the order he had built. The idea that something valuable might only come through not controlling it felt almost dangerous. The first time he pressed. "When did it happen?" 3 weeks after I arrived. I was walking the garden path before dawn. It stepped out of the mist and watched me. I stopped moving. So did it. We stood there perhaps 5 minutes before it came closer. "And you weren't afraid?" "No, my lord." "Why not?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her stillness reminded him of the deer itself. "Because it wasn't threatening me. It was deciding whether to trust me. And it decided yes." Eventually, Evander moved to the window, looking out toward the garden where the impossible had occurred. The nobility has been trying to approach that creature for over a decade. Huntsmen. Nobles. My own father attempted it before he died. All of them fail. "Yes, my lord. Yet you succeeded without trying." "I didn't succeed at anything, Your Grace. I simply didn't fail by forcing what wasn't offered." He turned back to her sharply. "You speak carefully, Miss Collier. As though you've spent considerable time thinking about this." "I spend considerable time thinking about many things." Her voice remained even. "Thoughts are free, even for servants." That almost sounded like criticism. "Observation, my lord. Not criticism." The distinction felt important, though Evander could not immediately articulate why. He studied her in the lamplight, reassessing everything he thought he knew about his household, about the invisible people who maintained his life while remaining unseen themselves. "Tomorrow morning," he said finally, "I want you to take me to where you see it." Her composure cracked, just slightly. "Your Grace, I don't control. I'm not asking you to control it. I'm asking you to show me where you watch. Nothing more." She hesitated, then nodded once. "As you wish." The next morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of winter dawn that turned breath to mist. Evander met her in the garden as arranged, and together they walked in silence through paths he knew intimately, but had never truly observed. Renna moved differently when unobserved by the household. Not improper, but natural. She noticed birds settling in bare branches, the way frost clung to rose thorns, the angle of light through morning clouds. She noticed life. They reached a small clearing near the forest edge, and she stopped. Here. Nothing happened immediately. Minutes passed. Evander felt impatience rising but forced it down, remembering her words. Don't force what isn't offered. Then, movement. The white deer emerged from shadows, stepping into pale sunlight. It saw Evander and froze completely. Don't move, Renna whispered. Don't reach. Just breathe. He obeyed, feeling strangely like a child receiving instruction. The deer watched them both, deciding. Its gaze moved from him to Renna and back again. You're safe, Renna said softly. Not to Evander. To the deer. And somehow, impossibly, the creature seemed to understand. It did not approach him. Not yet, perhaps not ever, but it did not flee either. It simply stood there, allowing him to witness what he had spent years trying to capture. In that moment, Evander understood something that unsettled him profoundly. He had built his entire life around control, around maintaining distance, around commanding rather than connecting. And in doing so, he had missed everything that mattered. The deer eventually turned and vanished back into the forest. Renna remained still beside him, and when she finally glanced his way, there was no triumph in her expression, only quiet acceptance. Thank you, he said. For what, my lord? For showing me what I couldn't see. Something shifted in her eyes then. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement, as though she recognized that he had just understood something important. They walked back to the house in silence, but the silence felt different now. Charged with questions Evander did not yet know how to ask. The whispers began within days. Servants noticed the dupe requesting Renna's presence more frequently. Guests remarked on the unusual incident with the deer. And Lady Marguerite Sinclair, a widow who had been positioning herself as the future Duchess of Ashford for nearly 2 years, began watching Renna with calculating displeasure. Evander told himself his interest was merely intellectual. Renna possessed knowledge about the estate, about observation, about patience that could prove valuable. He consulted her about the gardens, about wildlife patterns, about details he had never thought to consider before. But he also found himself rearranging his mornings to encounter her in the library. Noticed when she was absent from the household. Listened for her voice in corridors he had no reason to walk through. He realized with growing alarm, seeking her out. Not as an employer seeks an employee, but as a man seeks someone whose presence had become necessary. The crisis came on a frozen February evening when Lady Sinclair hosted a dinner at Ashford Keep, ostensibly to celebrate the season, but actually to demonstrate her command of his household. She had arranged everything with meticulous precision, from seating to service to conversation topics designed to showcase her suitability as Duchess. Renna was assigned to serve the head table. She moved through her duties with flawless efficiency until Lady Sinclair, smiling with practiced cruelty, knocked a wine glass directly into her path. The crystal shattered against stone floor. Silence fell immediately. How clumsy, Lady Sinclair said sweetly. Do be more careful, girl. Renna's expression didn't change. Of course, my lady. My apologies. She knelt to collect the shards, and Evander felt something inside him snap. Because he had seen exactly what happened. Had watched Lady Sinclair's deliberate motion. Had witnessed cruelty disguised as accident. Enough, he said quietly. Every head turned toward him. Your Grace. Lady Sinclair's smile remained fixed. I saw what you did. Her composure faltered. I'm sure I don't know what. You knocked the glass deliberately. His voice remained level, but something in it made the entire table stiffen. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. Lady Sinclair's face paled. My lord, surely his servant's clumsiness. Miss Collier has never been clumsy. Not once in the months she has served this household. He stood slowly. You, however, have just demonstrated remarkable discourtesy in my home. The silence became suffocating. Renna remained frozen on the floor, her hands full of broken glass. Stand up, Evander said gently. To Renna, not Lady Sinclair. She obeyed slowly, confusion clear in her eyes. Leave the glass. Someone else will manage it. He turned to the assembled guests. This dinner is concluded. Thank you for attending. The dismissal was absolute. Guests rose uncertainly, exchanging shocked glances. Lady Sinclair looked stricken, but Evander had already turned away, extending his hand toward Renna. Walk with me. She hesitated only a moment before accepting his hand, and together they left the dining hall while the entire household watched in stunned silence. They did not speak until they reached the garden. where snow fell in soft curtains through darkness. Renna pulled her hand back carefully, maintaining propriety, even now. You shouldn't have done that, she said quietly. Defended you? Humiliated a lady of standing on my behalf. The gossip will be, I don't care about gossip. You should. You're a duke. And you are the only person in this entire estate who has ever shown me something true. The words came out rougher than intended. Do you know what I've realized these past weeks? She shook her head silently. That I have spent my entire life building walls, maintaining control, keeping everyone at precisely the right distance to avoid risk, avoid pain, avoid anything that might disturb the perfect order I've constructed. He stepped closer, and then you arrived. You, who controls nothing and connects with everything, who sees what I've been blind to, who made a wild creature trust you simply by being trustworthy. Your Grace, I'm not finished. His voice softened. That deer chose you because it recognized something I've been too proud to see. Strength that doesn't need to dominate. Courage that doesn't need to conquer. Worth that exists regardless of title or station. Tears glittered in her eyes. You're a duke. I'm a maid. This can't it? He caught her hand again, gently. My father spent his entire life chasing that deer, trying to capture it, control it, own it. He died having never touched it, because he never understood that some things only come freely. And I think I've been my father, building cages of propriety and calling them safety. And I think you've shown me a different way. He paused. If you'll have me. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then, carefully, she said, the deer came to me because I wanted nothing from it. No proof, no trophy, no validation. Just witness. I know. If I say yes to this, to you, it must be the same. Not because you need validation from society or proof that you've changed, but because you actually want what comes freely between us. The challenge in her words struck deep. Evander felt the truth of it settle like snow on bare ground. You're right, he said quietly. And the answer is yes. I want this. Not because it proves anything, but because every morning feels incomplete until I hear your voice. She smiled then, soft and genuine. That's a much better answer. Is it good enough? Ask me properly and find out. So he did. Not there in the snow, but 3 months later in the garden clearing where the white deer still appeared each dawn. He knelt in morning mist and offered her not a ring alone, but a promise that he would spend his life learning to see the world the way she did, with open hands and patient heart. She said yes. The deer, standing nearby, seemed almost to nod approval. The wedding scandalized half the nobility and enchanted the other half. But Evander discovered he genuinely did not care, because he had finally learned what mattered. Years later, their children would wake before dawn to watch the white deer with their mother, learning to be still, to observe, to connect without controlling. And Evander, standing beside his wife in the quiet morning light, understood that some truths only reveal themselves to those wise enough to stop chasing them. The deer had chosen her, and in choosing her, it had taught him the most important lesson of his life, that real strength lies not in capturing what is wild, but in becoming trustworthy enough that it chooses to stay.